Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, I'm joined by Kenneth Miepe, Vice President of People and Culture at Valtech. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm fine. Thank you.
It's been a while. How's the family? How's everything?
Family's fine. The spring has come to Denmark, so whenever the degrees get above 10, we are like you're throwing the shirts and running out in the garden. So we're happy. Spring is great. So we're very happy.
It's kind of like strange in the UK because it's like one day it's raining. Like yesterday it was pouring down with rain, and then we wake up today, the sun's out, but nothing unusual in the UK.
We're very, very much alike from UK to Denmark, so it's not that big difference. I know exactly that.
Well, look, last time we spoke, it was maybe like a year ago, right? Things were pretty crazy at the time. How are things?
Yeah.
It seems like you're back in the office now. Firstly,
we're back in the office, and I was actually, as soon as the opportunity to get back in the offices, I took it. But that's just how I am. I really enjoy being in the office with people, although there weren't that many. But it's right. For a year ago, we were still in the pandemic. We were still struggling with bits and pieces, and the waves were coming across different countries at a different pace and things like that. So we were still in a lot of uncertainty. I think we're in a different place now. I don't think the COVID has disappeared. We've seen that, but we're dealing with it in a different way, which opens up for us to also do some thoughts and thinking about how do we deal with all the stuff that this pandemic brought with it. Yeah. Especially from what you said about it has accelerated the future way of working or new ways of working and new ways of leading and stuff like that. So we're spending a lot of time on finding ways to deal with that, while at the same time looking at a super hot labor market. There's a scarcity of people, that's unimaginable within our industry.
On that point,
it also is across.
Yeah. On that point, tell everyone a little bit more about Valtech, who maybe not be aware.
Yeah, for sure. Valtech is a global digital agency. So I sometimes use the terminology. In the old days, we would have been called a web agency. But over the years, the web and the internet and the digital has become core of every business. So what we're dealing with today is way more than just another website. It's more about the whole digital transformation. And sometimes it starts with a website. Sometimes it's a commerce site. Sometimes it's totally different digital solution. But that's what we do. We just crossed the 5,500 people line, and now in 22 countries, and are growing very fast.
Wow. But it's interesting because you're one, like you said a minute ago, like the type of talent that you're going after, everyone is, because it's such a hot space, but also it must be quite interesting that your business has to constantly be evolving and keeping up with the latest tech.
Yes.
Or whatever's kind of happening in this space, which is evolving so fast.
Yes, and it's and one can put it in two ways. One is that let's say what we used to call our normal competitors when it comes to talent acquisition, like our colleagues within the industry. Now our clients are also competitors in terms of talents. Because everybody knows they basically had to act more or less like a software company and provide that. And in that, they are also hiring and growing their own digital organizations or digitalizing their own organizations. So we are typically, not just a pool of resources anymore. We're supposed to really be the experts. We're supposed to really know how to not just make the new fancy website, but actually also how do you implement a digital core in everything that you do in your organization? How do you make teams work? How do you make teams work across countries, which is something that we have been practicing for many, many years. So when the pandemic hit, we could basically just open the laptops from our home and then just work as we did before, which we did.
Yeah.
So it is a crazy market when it comes to the.
It's interesting, right? Definitely couldn't be more of an exciting space though to be in right now. Challenging, but super exciting to be in there.
It's fun. Definitely. It's great fun and exciting. I would say to some extent we have been privileged in the industry that we were in, because whatever happened when the pandemic hit us was an acceleration of the let's say digitalization of any company. And that means that since we couldn't be that much together, we got to figure out how to provide digital services and things like that. You saw that, and we've talked a lot about that over the last couple of years. So we were in that. So we did not see at all a drop when the pandemic hit. Of course, in the first month or something, like everybody pulls the break, because we didn't know what was going on. But we relatively quickly pivoted back and even above our level at that point in time.
What is everyone obviously has had to look at, new ways of working over the last 2 years. What did your org structure look like, or way of working look like before versus now, and where you're heading towards? Can you paint that picture for us?
Yeah, I think before we were a global company, and we called ourselves a connected company. So it was really a matter of, when we set teams together for our clients, we do it across country, we do it across teams and things like that. So this is something that we have learned and grown and developed over the years. So as I said, when the pandemic hit, we were able to do that going forward. So that meant we were used to work in distributed teams. So it didn't matter whether your team was in Germany or in the US or Ukraine or Denmark or stuff like that. We had these teams already. So that part of basically being able to work from anywhere, we were already able to apply that from the beginning. But now, as I said, we are also a little bit on the other side now. So we are, as anyone else, well, what's the new normal here? Which element from the past do we want to bring with us in the future, and which one are we, throwing in the bin and have to come up with something new? So I think we had a relatively good starting point, but we certainly also we already knew, but it was also accelerated. What are the effects on culture? What are the effects on the feeling of belonging? The whole mental health that people, especially during the pandemic, nobody knew what was going on, what's going to happen. Am I ever going to see people again? We simply really have had a lot of people who honestly didn't see any of their colleagues for more than a year or even worse. So that naturally sparkled our thoughts on how do we deal with this. We've always been a company with a very, very strong culture, and I think that a lot of companies would say that, but that is what people constantly say is why they sometimes come back to Valtech. I'm a comebacker myself.
Oh, are you?
Okay. Sometimes, it's hard to define what it is, what this culture thing is. But we have asked, and we ask our employees, what words would you use to describe that? And it constantly comes back with the feeling of family. And I've always had a hard time of using the word family.
Me too, right?
I honestly really never used that. But these were the words from our own employees. There was a feeling that they had. It's a very people-oriented organization. So how do you keep that when we're no longer really together? So that was where we also started to think, what do we actually believe in? What's the purpose of a workplace besides paying people some money to do some work? And one of the beliefs that we put up was that We actually believe that a workplace had a role to play in the fundamental basic social needs we have as humans. We think that we are able to provide something with your colleagues that you don't really get when together with your friends and families. There's something else. We're together on something else that your friends and families will always be some kind of spectators to. So there's another, we just have something else in common. And that attracts us. And that's just not just something about the professional discipline or anything like that. It's the people. That's something you share things with. So that was one of our beliefs, that they think we have a role to play. And then one of my strongest reactions in the early pandemics, also when it came out that everybody came out and say, you can work. No, we don't need people back in the offices anymore. And all the finance people, they were, yes, then we can cut a lot of square meters in our expensive offices and expensive addresses because people can just sit from home. That to me was more a PR stunt than necessarily understanding what was at stake here.
Many of them are now reverting back.
Exactly, and that's a little bit that we talked about. It's not necessarily a golden solution. What people thought was the golden solution and what people wanted to hear at some point, that has changed a bit. So we put forward at least a principle about we want to be more together than apart, not have to be more together than apart, and that's the difference. And that's also,
I like that.
Yeah, but it was also a reaction to this. We'll have a hybrid model, but you have to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. And my first question would be, why? And the second one would be, how do you want to measure that? And the third one, if people aren't, what's the consequences? So you would be.
What was the reaction when you had that conversation with the rest of the leadership team? Was everyone on the same page, or were there people that saying, yes, we want 2 people, we want them back 2 days a week?
No, there wasn't. But there are cultural differences when you're in 22 different countries, and there are local, legislation that one has to take into account. Like in France, where workplace is something that you define together with the unions, and you have to have an agreement. So they have to come into the office 2 or 3 days a week. And that's just France. But in the rest of the countries. No, but there's something that certainly has to fall a little bit more into the how do we actually then do it? How much do we actually allow?
So what were the guidelines then that you set out?
Well, the guidelines was that it was based in both our core beliefs and values about we are a company where we basically trust our people to be adults and responsible.
Okay, yeah, put it in the hands of the leaders and managers themselves to make a decision.
And I think that's always let's say the first advice I give to any leaders in the company is that especially the younger ones or the ones that are trying out this for the first time is start with trusting your people. If that doesn't work, you will also always have you'll always have means to figure out how. Yeah,
assume positive intent.
Assume people are adults and responsible and accountable for their time, especially in a company like ours, where time is, let's say, the hours spent without being able to be billed has a direct influence on the business value and our business. So you can easily come into something like that being, that can be, I need to have absolute control because every 15 minutes spent on something that I cannot bill is wasted. The best way to deal with that is push trust out there and give people the freedom and the level of autonomy to have that influence on their own work life. So I wouldn't say everything is set in stone, but we have not put forward anything about you have to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. Instead, we're working, and it's not fully implemented right now, but we're working on more a model where we got inspiration from Harvard Business School on a model where they say there are 2 parameters where there are some constraints and non-constraints. And one is a time and one is a place. So sometimes there are some constraints on the time, like your and my meeting here. there was a set time. So that's a constraint, but the place was not necessarily a constraint. I could have loved to sit in the couch with you, but since it happens that we are sitting apart, it's not a constraint. But are you onboarding a new colleague into your team, and that colleague turns up on the first day at 9 o'clock? I want the team to be there at 9 o'clock in the office, because that, the connection and the experience of coming to your first work day and meeting the people that you're going to work included. So that provides some principles that you can act with, but it's not rigid. It's also an element of common sense that we try to add to that.
What's the reaction been so far?
When you put that forward, it has been positive, and I would say, like many other things happens in Valtech, everything isn't always put in a manual or in a textbook, and sometimes it just happens without necessarily proper rollouts and stuff. And already in many of the countries, we're kind of working with that. It just fell right without us having officially pushed this model out. So it's already working. And in our employee engagement surveys, one of the things that people rate the highest here is the freedom, the ability to work remote, the autonomy. So they are also,
So you already have that culture anyway, right? So why have to put,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not coming up with a new formula for the new way of working. It was more on building on what you have. So having a good, strong foundation on how you trust people and how you run your company has helped us, at least, to find that way. So that's kind of more the hybrid and working from home or things like that. The other part that we have been spending a lot of time on is actually, well, what are we going to do about these offices? I'm sitting here in our Copenhagen office in some old building. It's fantastic office right to the water. But also when I look in through the room, there's some element of sweatshops, because there's a number of desks just next to each other with screens all the way down. And I think we will have to rethink our offices in a way, especially if we have this principle of being more together than apart. We have to give a reason to also come into the office,
not just
because it's nice to meet. There has to be another experience. So we are actually working still, with the terminologies of going from, instead of talking of offices and talking about experience hubs where people can come and collaborate, and very often with the clients and things like that. So it's much more flexible. So we have some elements that we needed for future design of the offices, that much more is in the term of, think of your office as a retail store.
I was thinking the same thing, like you need a rebrand.
You need to have it and think of it as your opportunity for a physical manifestation of your brand or your values, and use the office to that instead of a place where people come to work. And that's a fundamentally different way of thinking, because it also has to be a place where people can come to work. But you have to think in another environment, create an experience. And not just once, not just come up with that fantastic office and redesign it and then it's there, but it has to be a little bit more dynamic. Something new has to happen over the time. That's the retail store thinking. That
it's really cool. Like I mentioned to you before the show, I was at Lego at their office, and they've done some really cool things. And one of the things that we saw, which I ended up incorporating into our interview, is they have campfires made of Lego. And I was like, what's that? And they were like, oh, there are campfires. And I was like, what's well, in every single location across the whole world, they have a campfire in every office. And this is a space where you can sit around a campfire. It's made of Lego, a giant fire made of Lego with lights, and a very cozy, super, collaborative space where they can come around, share ideas, kind of bounce ideas off each other, and they call it the campfire. And it's just like, and they even have them in the manufacturing sites.
Yeah.
So even in the manufacturing facilities,
super.
they have the campfires where people can get around and share ideas or challenges they're having and just come together around the campfire. And it just really fits the culture, the brand. Obviously, it's made of Lego, literally.
Yeah.
And so when we did our interview with the leadership team, we did it around the campfire. I was like, let's do it around the campfire as well. But that was like a really, they could have had a boardroom. They could have had a traditional, space, but they really incorporated it to their culture and their values and what it means to work at Lego, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. And I think that's the same way of, that's a route that Lego went down. And I've had the pleasure of working at Lego also before. And it's, when you talk about values, that's one of the companies that I still can remember the values of all the companies I've had the pleasure of working in. But it's a very strong value-driven organization, and they have this fabulous product that can shape an environment around you that adds DNA, product, and experience.
It's pretty easier for them.
I'm not saying it is easier. It is easier for them, but it doesn't mean that it's difficult for anyone else. One just has to figure it out how to be. So that mindset of looking at it as a retail store with collaboration spaces more than just desks, flex desks. We also know that we had to accommodate different personalities. So not everybody would feel safe in coming into the office and not knowing where to sit. And there are some people who prefer, to know exactly where to sit. So we have to accommodate that as well. It's easy to go all the way aboard that everything is, a moving or flexible thing. You may drop some people there, and we have everything from business, salespeople to technologists to strategists to creatives to marketing. So you can count on any personality that we have them here, and they have different preferences, and we have to accommodate that as well, and not just go totally hayway in the new.
You have to have both. Like all the companies I've been visiting recently, they have a particular section or floor where you have those desks, you have those specific spots, but then but that's now a small part. In the past that was 100%. Now, for example, Lego, I think there's 4 floors, and one of the floors is that, but the other 3 are purely dedicated to those collaborative creative spaces. Whereas it's kind of flipped 360. Like, it used to be you have a small space to have collaboration, and the rest of the entire company was desks. So it's kind of like slowly moving in the other direction. And they have lockers, which I thought was cool. You just have lockers where people can store their stuff and do that. So it's interesting to see people's approaches.
Yeah, but that's especially the locker idea instead of having a thing is something that we have also done in the offices that we have already redesigned. But it's also, to catch into other super trends, if you might say it, is that when you start looking about redesigning your office, not just to accommodate the new way of working and maybe having, I don't know, between 30 to 50% of the organization in the office at the same time, is also to tap into the whole diversity and inclusion parts. If you really look into a lot of companies and offices that are not, suitable for everybody, with disabilities or anything like that, have that in mind as well. The whole sustainability part in making sure that you come into offices, and it all adds to the, let's say, employee experience of your office also being a nice place and embracing more than just collaborative areas and stuff like that. You have the opportunity now to have all of these elements.
You want it to be somewhere where people want to spend their time, right? Like you could see that people they look forward to going in, to be in that environment. Something I'm also quite excited about is seeing how technology is going to play a part of maybe having like an app or a system to show who's in the office, who's not, and to try and kind of manufacture or be a bit more intentional about making those water cooler moments happen. I'll give you an example. When I was interviewing the CHRO of WePro recently, and I walked into the office and we were setting everything, and the CHRO happened to bump into a colleague that he hadn't seen in 2 years, and he was like, "Oh, I'm really happy we bumped into each other. It would have been a shame that you were in today and we may have not seen each other. So how many of those interactions can we maybe use technologies so you can log in an app in the morning and see who's in today?
Yeah.
Like who's in now? Where are they now? And make these really cool moments happen in the business, which would be, because again, it would have been a shame that they didn't see each other if they just so happened to not walk past each other.
There's a whole, how much tracking of people's movements, where they are and stuff like that. There's a balance to be tracked, but there's no doubt that what I think happened in a lot of companies when the pandemic hit us, that kind of, when we started opening the offices, that kind of management was done in an Excel sheet.
Yes.
So and that will evolve into, and it has, and we've seen that as well, evolve into different kind of apps where you see, I can order a desk. I like to sit there today, and then or reserve an area because the team is coming in or whatever, and things like that. But much more flexible. And as I said, there's no need to come to the office unless you're always welcome to, but there's basically no need to come to the office if you're going to sit 8 hours in team meetings all day. You could just as well sit at home to do that, save the commute, help the planet on that. So there are all kind of different factors that has to
it's interesting because the complete opposite from that is, like my wife's company at the moment, she goes in, they've decided twice a week, and one of the 2 days she doesn't see anyone. She just sits on her own at a desk, travels 1 hour to work, 1 hour back. It also means we have to now have nursery for our daughter, and it gets a bit complicated there with pickup times and stuff like that, the added stress, and literally sees nobody, but she can go any 2 days of the week, but it just so happens that the days that she can go, no one else is there. So it's just some of the most useless, like, it hurts me. Like, it's such there's no reason. Like, you don't even see anyone in your team or the business. You literally travel in.
And that's potentially the consequence if you put out a policy that we have to be in the office 2 days a week.
Yeah, exactly.
It can turn out completely meaningless.
Yeah, I know. I know. I thought I'm actually going to invite her CHRO on the show and have a
I think that could be a good idea.
I don't know. I always pick on her company, so I think they don't like me at this point because I'm always calling them out. I'm always like, because before the pandemic, they used to have to go in front of a committee of a panel of like people, and you used to have to pitch them of why you can work from home a few days a week, which I found was insane. It's like these random strangers get to decide whether you can work from home or not. It's hilarious.
It's not very trust.
Yeah,
there's not much in that.
It's the opposite of your approach. You're saying lead with positive intent and trust employees. That's kind of the reverse. Of that justification. How has everything that we've been talking about impacted your talent acquisition strategy?
Well, all of what I'm talking about, and that there's, as I said, also it isn't all of this that we have fully implemented right now. We learned some stuff from the first sessions, and we're now doing a version 2.0. But it all goes into the narrative that we use in our employee branding, and when we talk and speak with candidates, that we have to be able to put a compelling narrative together. So there we have a hard time finding enough people, but my experience is definitely that whenever we come in contact, we have a strong narrative on this. But it is just as much, the influence is just as much on that we hire people from also even in countries where you don't have a legal entity, which is always a little bit more difficult than if you have a legal entity. But out from the principle that we cannot expect people to somehow happen to live just next door to where we plan to place an office. And that's kind of been, like in the old normal was very much, it was, if you live in this city, then you work.
Doesn't that seem so foreign now? Like, I mean, like it seems so strange now when you think about it, that that's the way we just did business.
Yeah, it does. And naturally, let's say the principle of being more together than apart is still there. But you know, when I just hired a person in Scotland, we don't have any office in Scotland, and the closest Scotland is in Manchester and stuff like that. That person is not going to come into any office, you know, on a regular basis. But that at least gives the flexibility, because we know how to work in distributed teams, and we trust that a person even sitting in Scotland will be able to be accountable for his own time and for delivering what we agree upon.
Yeah.
So we are hiring from everywhere, but there are also some, you know, pure practical elements about how this hiring people in countries where you don't have entities. And I know that there are done all kind of different approaches to how to manage that.
There's plenty of companies popping up that can help.
That's a booming industry, that one.
It really is, yeah. It's interesting. Probably, 3 years ago, I was working with Carlsberg and Safeguard Global, who's a company that help companies do exactly what you're describing. Yeah. And I was interviewing Carlsberg's CHRO and speaking with Bjorn, who's the CEO of Safeguard, and was talking about this topic before the pandemic. And they were helping Carlsberg, you know, set up entities in all over the world so they'd hire. And at the time, it was seen to be something very innovative and, you know, forward thinking, and that was why we did the interview. And now it's the normal. Like, you kind of have to have an approach, and obviously doing it internally is very tough to build out that capability. So many companies are just working with partners, of course, in that space.
And so do we, and we have even had people in countries, especially working for the Danish organization in Spain, where we don't have an entity for 8 years. So we even in the early beginnings, we tried this out and having a third party to help us, you know, doing that. And it is something that we have to deal with in a more structured way. Yeah. Because when you also look at that industry blooming up, it's also all kinds of different ways you can do it. But the effect, to just close up on what you said about the effect on the talent acquisition strategy and stuff like it, is as we are moving as a company into what we call one Valtech, more than the separate autonomous P&L units, and do more together, we more hire for the company or for the region than necessarily for Valtech Germany or Valtech Denmark, based on what we exactly need in the Danish organization or the German organization. Because we can work in teams across countries like that overnight. We have the whole setup up and running. So our talent acquisition teams are local people, but we are working more on a regional level as one team now. So much more helping each other. So it has again accelerated a process we were already on, beginning, because we wanted to do more together than apart. But again, an example of the acceleration that all right, we have to do that even faster than we planned.
Quite a big shift in mindset, right? From local to global. It's a bit, again, but super exciting. I'm sure it's made the work of the team. Yes, challenging, but also very exciting.
Yeah, it is, and especially when we're growing at the pace that we do, having had this small autonomous entrepreneurial mindset and feeling for many years, we're now growing. So there are some things that we simply need to have a little bit more structure on and a little bit more standardization without becoming a rigid corporation. This is something that we are really dealing with to avoid that feeling coming into our company.
Listen, before I let you go, I do want to jump into our quick fire round. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but you only have 30 seconds per question to answer. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fantastic. What are your hobbies and passions outside of the office?
With the risk of being corny, my family matters a lot, but I like skiing, I like football, and then I do like to do practical things in the house and the garden as a balance towards this computer and screens and everything like that.
Nice.
I don't have green fingers, but it's just anything with a hammer and a saw and stuff like that.
Right.
And the machines, I like it.
When you get around to it. Normally it's my
when I get around to it.
Normally it's when my wife keeps moaning to the point where I'm like, okay, it's worth doing it not to hear her moan at me anymore as well. No worries.
Okay.
If you could click your fingers and change one thing about HR, what would you change?
I wouldn't call it HR. Sorry about that.
There you go.
There's a reason why we call it people and culture in Valtech. Yes, there are HR thingies and disciplines within that, but it just sets another direction also mentally for people. So
yeah,
that was the click.
No, that's a good one. I agree. I keep saying to the team, we're gonna have to somehow change HR leaders now. To people leaders, and the sign's got to go.
Redesign,
exactly. How would your friends and family describe what you do for a living?
I think they would say that he needs to find a lot of people. He hires a lot of people, and he travels a lot. And the family would probably say a little bit too much.
Okay. Fair play. Very honest answer there. If you wasn't working in HR, where do you think you'd be?
I'd probably be still where I came from, which is I have a sales, marketing, and business development background. And so I have been account director or something, working with the business and client development or things like that, or marketing and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
That could be.
Very briefly, obviously wasn't planned on this one. What was it about HR that kind of kept you where you are versus sales?
It's a super interesting story, Chris. I don't think we had the time, but back in 2010, 9-10, in the Danish organization, we experimented a lot with the organization about a concept we call personal leaders. You can elect your own boss, and we really started with working in cross-functional teams. And that was super exciting. I think that change and how you motivate people, and people can get elected and not elected as a boss. So that I got the responsibility of these new leaders in that, and then it grew from there.
That's a great way to taste different things. And then, I'm surprised you didn't run away when you realized all the work you have to do in HR.
I always had the pleasure of having a couple of people around me who knew actually things about HR, and then I could kind of focus on the other things. And I don't want to take it away, but I think of let's say people and culture, and especially talent acquisition and the people in the teams is they are salespeople. They constantly have to sell the company, both externally to candidates and on a daily basis also internally to our existing employees. Yeah. So that mindset of sell, communication, creating experiences, that's at least my approach into this.
Yeah, love that. Who would you say is the one person in your career that's had the biggest impact?
It might be the former MD here in Valtech, Denmark, who put me in the position of that new leadership team back in 2010, because it did flip, let's say, what I was used to do into something else. What was that? And he was a good support, and he was really good. Yeah, I learned a lot from him.
What was his name? We have to give him a shout out.
Carsten Brogaard.
Amazing.
He's still in the company. He's doing something else, and we're very good friends. And but he was good.
Do you think he saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Or he paved the way, and he was very open to say there are other ways we can do this, and he had a creative mind himself. So that was super. It was super inspiring to work with him.
Amazing.
Although he could be a control freak, so you can't even imagine.
It worked out well. It worked out well. And then last question. It worked out well. Last question. Obviously, it's been a crazy ride, especially if you've just become a HR leader in the last kind of 2 years. It's been more of a crazy ride. What advice would you give to the HR leaders of tomorrow? The ones coming up the ranks to sit in your seat. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I probably already said it, is that start trusting people and then take it from there. I don't have the magic, you know, wisdom or sentence. What has worked for me a lot over the years is to actually start by trusting that people know what they do and that they're accountable. And if they aren't, it will show, and then you will take the actions afterwards. But don't start the other way. Never start the other way around.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's like we also assume we know what they want as well, and then we create these huge projects and systems and strategies around what we think.
Yes.
Our people want.
Oh, right. So you're a front-end developer, so you must like front-end 24/7, 365. No, they're consultants. They also like to be with other parts. So I agree. Yeah, put out the trust, and people will find a way.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. We'll have to come visit you soon. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you very much, Chris. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Take care.